They want to be free. 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 Free. They say they want to be free, yet they're not willing to plant any seeds. So how do we expect to be free without being self-sufficiently, governmentless, living independently? They, who's they? They who want change yet still sell their dignity and freedom in exchange for business transactions and political man-made sanctions, preferring an economical, political, and judicial system, welcoming corporatocracy. They're willingly controlled by business corporations, corporate interests. Corporate interests. I call it hypocrisy. Elizabeth Warren once referenced Theodore Roosevelt warning regarding powerful corporate entities threatening the very foundations of democracy, explaining back bailouts, excessively paying for CEOs, and the exploitations of national treasuries, people, and natural resources. Yes, I'm gonna be criticizing globalization, corporatocracy, and a perverted form of aristocracy called oligarchy. Capitalism, bankers controlling the flow of currency, the wave of alchemy, with just a few to rule and command those with nobility, fame, and wealth. Feudalism is capitalism controlled by corporatocracy, owned by the oligarchy, which are the black nobility. I'ma say it again. I'm criticizing globalization, corporatocracy, and a perverted form of aristocracy called oligarchy, capitalism, bankers controlling the flow of currency, the wave of alchemy, with just a few to rule and command those with nobility, fame, and wealth. Because feudalism is capitalism controlled by corporatocracy, owned by the oligarchy, which are the black nobility. So tell me, I want to know, how do we expect to be free if we're not willing to plant any seeds and live self-sufficiently, providing for our own needs, providing for our own needs,
Quisiera decirte tantas cosas, pero ya sé que la vida es así.
Sé que no debo decir lo que dicta mi emoción. Siento que gustas de mí y no sé por cuál razón. Los celos me están matando. Quiero estar cerca de ti. Mi amor te está esperando. Yo te quiero hacer feliz.
Si pudiera decirte solamente una palabra, mía serás.
Cuando tú me estás mirando, cuando el tiempo va pasando, y yo sin poderte hablar, y yo sin poderte hablar, y yo sin poderte hablar, y yo sin poderte hablar. Sé que no debo decir lo que dicta mi emoción. Siento que gustas de mí y no sé por cuál razón. Los celos me están matando. Quiero estar cerca de ti.
Quédate sentada
Y mi
donde
amor te
estás.
está esperando. Yo te quiero hacer feliz. Te quiero hacer feliz. Ay, 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 ay. Cuando tú me estás mirando.
Hasta el fin, como si nada, a tu lado,
Y yo sin
tu control.
poderte
Podrá notar nuestras miradas.
hablar.
Usted me desespera,
Y yo sin
ya no me puedo controlarme.
Y yo sin poderte hablar.
Daría
Y yo sin poderte hablar.
la vida entera
Y yo sin poder
Tan solo puedo mirarte.
Welcome back to another week, another episode of What in the Boriken is going on here. Your host, Def Poetry, Dr. Poetry, and we have our special guest today, Johnny. Shout out to Los Celos. Shout out to Willie Colon for the inspiration and behind that track right there. If y'all enjoyed that, you can find that on all platforms: iTunes, Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, everywhere. You name it, you go look for it. And welcome back. I'm glad to be back another week. Today we got some interesting topics. We will be going over and discussing the three main political parties in Puerto Rico. The New Progressive Party, Popular Democratic Party, and also the Puerto Rican Independence Party. We'll get a little bit into that a little bit further on. But Dr. Poetry, how you doing? What's going on now?
I am good. I love to hear that. Los Celos. I love that song. I love it. Welcome, Johnny. Good to see you. Good to see you. Yay. And like Def just said, we're going to get into those conversations that we really don't know what's happening. We're all learning here, right? Because we know Puerto Rico, Boriken, is a territory of the United States since 1898. It has been the center of a complex and evolving political status debate, y'all. And as a United States territory, we know it occupies a unique position. Its residents are United States citizens, but do not have full representation in Congress and cannot vote in presidential elections.
Nope.
And so over the years, this has been an ongoing discussion about the island's future political status, with three main point options dominating the conversations: statehood, independence, and enhanced commonwealth or free association. So each of these paths carries significant legal, political, economic, and cultural implications. So for us to understand these options, it's so important for us to have an informed dialogue about Borinquen's future and the rights of its people. And that means you out there, even if you're not on the island right now, your birthrights are there because the blood that runs through your veins is Boricua blood if your parents are Boricuas and you were born in the States. So this is a conversation we all need to have. So again, welcome. And we're going to be sharing some videos, right? Yeah.
That's right. Awesome. Johnny.
Before we jump in, I'd like to say thank you for having me. Good morning to Def Poetry. Good morning to Dr. Poetry.
Thank you.
Glad I'm back. And let's get into these detrimental topics.
Yeah, man. It's a lot.
Glad to have you back on as well. It's a pleasure.
There's so much going on. And Def, I wanted you to at least, first of all, I want to give a big shout out to our shows while I pull up this wonderful video. Because we have a whole lineup this week, and it is Thursday. So I know we in the Borinquen mode right now, but all this week we've been busy. And we had Hear Me Out Poetry is doing a lot of things. So Def is gonna give you, while I pull up this video, y'all. First of all, hello to y'all. Thank y'all for popping in. Give us a breakdown of what we got going on this week.
Yeah, so you guys, if you haven't tuned in or checked out, every Saturday at 7 p.m. we have Hear Me Out Poetry. Also, we go into Mondays where we air the Poetic Clinic with Granny Wowzers and Miss Cheesecake. They dive into very interesting topics and incorporate the poetry as well. And I believe it's on Tuesdays. We have the DJ Chili Chill show. There you'll be able to find DJ Chili Chill and the whole Birdhouse family.
Yes.
And they'll be mixing up not only poetry, but artists, independent artists, upcoming artists, and artists within the Birdhouse family. They are also affiliated with the Wu family. It's a great environment. It's a great vibe.
Beautiful.
Please go check that out. Please go
shout out to DJ Chili Chill
Shout
and
out
the
to DJ
Birdhouse
Chill.
family.
That's right. And also we have What in the Borinquen is going on. And we also have Floetic Justice behind the badge. We just had Johnny on there. The last episode, if you haven't tuned in and checked it out, we got into a really in-depth and really interesting conversation about getting out of, adjusting outside of an active position, whether it's service, active duty service, or police, law enforcement, anybody behind the uniform. Great conversation, great time. Please go check that out. And am I missing anything?
Well, we always seem to forget, and it's okay because since we're not on there, they think it's not. But let me tell you something, it's still a show. It's called the FLOETIC Video Box.
That's right.
We're bringing poetry. We had MTV. We had the video music back in the days. Remember that? All those, the Casey Kasem and MTV and all that stuff. But you know what? Hear Me Out Poetry has the FLOETIC Video Music Box. The FLOETIC Video Box, which we present all these different types of videos, but it's the spoken word, the poetry, the floetry, FLOETIC echoes. And we have a little AI going on. We're in the year 2025, y'all. It's the year 2025. I could put whatever I want that's going to illustrate my vocals, my words, and my feelings and my passion. And I think we all love that because at the end of the day, it's the creativity behind it. And I want you guys to get a picture, an idea of what Def is saying, I'm saying, Cheesecake, Granny Wowzers. Big shout out to all the poets on Hear Me Out Poetry. Yes, so that's what that's about.
And as far as the visuals, I ain't complaining because I got a different hairstyle in every video. Yeah, so I ain't complaining. You know what I mean? I
just Rolos on. I think you had the doobie.
Yeah, I ain't even worried about it. So I'm cool.
What did you think about that, Johnny? Did you see him in Los Celos? Did you see how he looked?
It cracks me up. It cracks me up every time. I'm like, wow, you got a lot of hair, but now you rock.
That's okay. I know, right? Listen, the only problem I have, Johnny, with the AI is that it makes me too skinny. And I like to have my meat on me. I have all my groceries, okay? So it just makes us look, but I don't care because, the eyes are the windows to the soul. And if you look at it, my eyes are there. So that's all that matters. But I love that. Shout out to that. All right, y'all. We got our first video I want to present. I definitely feel like this woman, this woman, we have a series of 3 different videos. Okay. I believe her name is Gabriela. She does a wonderful job explaining all these different things. I've used her because I think she has a lot of credibility. She's very thorough and you'll see for yourself. Here we go. I'm gonna play this. Do you have anything to say, Def? I'm sorry, I hear you in the back.
Nope. Let's go into these. I'm interested in see what she's got to say because you said it's the three series, right? We're gonna dive into 3 different topics. She's gonna go into each political party. Is that what she's doing?
Yeah, like the history of each political party. Because like I said in the intro, for us to understand what's the status options, we need to know the history behind the status options.
Very true.
Right.
Okay. So we're going to look at this thoroughly. We're going to reflect. We're going to look at it. This is not about choosing any type of political party. This is about informing so we can have a very informative dialogue about what's happening and why it's happening. But before we talk about what's happening, we got to revisit the past and how we got here. All right. So I like her explanation. We're going to start off with the political party of the Independent Party. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Let's go.
Here we go.
What happened on this street in the town of Ponce was one of the most brutal ways in which the U.S. government tried to silence the pro-independence movement in Puerto Rico. What was supposed to be a peaceful march ended up with guards killing 19 people and injuring more than 200.
Yo vi tirar a la policía porque ellos le dispararon a la gente que estaban en la acera.
It also served to send a message to anyone who aligned with the Nationalist Party.
Puerto Rico, the island has prospered under U.S. rule, but a tiny extremist party committed to violence occasionally erupts in anti-U.S. outbursts.
There was a persecution for independence people.
Independence is the solution.
¿Por qué se nos ataca tanto
por decir que nosotros queremos que Puerto Rico sea una nación libre.
La libertad.
El gran milagro es que existan independentistas.
This video is the first in a series of 3 where I'm going to be talking about Puerto Rico's status. And I'm starting with the least popular option, independence. Today, only a minority of Puerto Ricans vote in favor of Puerto Rico being fully independent from the U.S. But those who do support that option say that's because for many years, the U.S. government persecuted, imprisoned, and even killed supporters of independence. And perhaps there's no better way to understand that history than to look at the life of the father of the Puerto Rican independence movement, Pedro Albizu Campos. Albizu was a child when the U.S. invaded Puerto Rico in 1898. He saw troops march in his town of Ponce. He was a gifted student, and he went on to study law at Harvard. And then came World War I, when the U.S. military was segregated. Being a dark-skinned Puerto Rican, he served in an African-American unit, where he would be exposed to racism in the U.S. That experience would play a part in shaping his attitude towards the United States. After the military, he returned to Harvard, and there he worked with and was inspired by leaders fighting for independence for their own countries. After he got his law degree, Albizu turned down offers like working for the U.S. Supreme Court. Instead, he chose to return to Puerto Rico. He joined the independence movement, and he was vocal about his support for taking up arms to free Puerto Rico. One of the reasons Albizu believed Puerto Rico needed independence was because of the damage that U.S. corporate interests were causing. Sugar companies were taking up land and keeping workers in poverty by paying them some 60 cents a day for 12-hour shifts. Here's a speech Albizu gave to workers.
Los yanquis, malos como son, egoístas como son, si encontraran oro en los huesos de nosotros, nos morirían en sus centrales azucareras.
In 1934, Albizu led the workers on an island-wide strike and won, forcing the U.S. sugar companies to pay the workers more. That gained him support with Puerto Ricans, but it also gained him some enemies from the U.S., and things turned violent the following year.
La policía insular, bajo el mando del gobierno de Estados Unidos, masacró a 4 jóvenes nacionalistas.
In 1935, U.S. police officers killed 3 nationalists who were sitting in a car and a 4th one who came to their defense. No officers were charged in those killings. That came to be known as the Rio Piedras massacre. And the following year, nationalists retaliated. 2 men killed the U.S.-appointed police chief. They were arrested and executed at the police headquarters without a trial. Albizu publicly called them martyrs and heroes, and he was arrested shortly after for sedition, or for inciting people to rebel against the U.S. government. Albizu went to trial, and a jury of mostly Puerto Ricans found him not guilty. So the judge ordered a new trial with a new jury. And this time, 10 jurors from the U.S. and only 2 Puerto Ricans found him guilty. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. This brings us to 1937, the year that the Ponce massacre happened. The museum that tells the story of this massacre is now closed because it was damaged during an earthquake. But that building used to be the nationalist headquarters in Ponce. And that's where that peaceful march I told you at the beginning of this video was taking place. And it was in part to protest Albizu's arrest. Well, when the US government heard it was taking place, they ordered police to stop it. The guards showed up heavily armed and they started shooting at the crowd. Among the people they killed was a 14-year-old girl. An investigation by the federal government found that the US-appointed governor was to blame for the massacre, but no one was ever arrested or charged for the murders. The governor didn't even apologize. This is a picture of the relatives of the victims. You can see the wall behind them is covered in bullet holes. Some 10 years later, Albizu was free again, and the government passed a law to further silence nationalists. They made it illegal for people to write about, talk about, or organize to try to take down the US government. But the nationalists carried on planning an armed revolution to free Puerto Rico. In 1950, they carried out a series of attacks. They led revolts in different towns. They attacked the governor's mansion and even tried to assassinate President Harry Truman in D.C.
Extreme fanatics of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party try to force their way in, guns blazing, to assassinate the President of the United States.
They were unsuccessful and had to surrender after the United States used military force and killed almost 30 nationalists. Hundreds were arrested, and Albizu was sentenced to 80 years in prison for masterminding the uprising. In the US, the whole thing was mostly reported as an incident among Puerto Ricans. So a few years later, the nationalists decided it was time to embarrass the US internationally, and they attacked Congress.
In Washington, D.C., ruthless, fanatic violence erupted in the halls of Congress.
4 nationalists fired shots in the House of Representatives and displayed the Puerto Rican flag. No one was killed, but 5 congressmen were injured.
The gun wielders and to their accomplices goes the evil distinction of having perpetrated a criminal outrage almost unique in America's history.
This is Rafael Cancel Miranda, one of the shooters when he was in his 80s.
Si tuviera que hacerlo, volvería a hacer. Nos asesinan democráticamente, pero tú no puedes levantarle la vista porque estás cometiendo un acto de terror. ¿Tú sabes? No. Tenemos derecho a pelear para atrás.
When she was arrested, Lolita Lebrón said she didn't go to kill anyone, but to die for Puerto Rico. Those words would inspire Oscar López Rivera.
Me puso como a cuestionarme allí mismo, ¿qué vas a hacer tú si una mujer puertorriqueña está dispuesta a dar su vida por Puerto Rico? ¿Y tú, que eres puertorriqueño, qué vas a hacer?
Similar to Albizu, Oscar says his disillusion with the U.S. government started when he joined the military.
Es Vietnam donde yo aprendo lo que es Estados Unidos.
He says he didn't want to go to war, but at this point Puerto Ricans were U.S. citizens and he was drafted.
En esa carta había un mensaje, decía, si no te reportas al centro de inducción en la fecha indicada, puedes enfrentar hasta 5 años de prisión federal. Yo tenía 22 años y lo menos que yo iba a hacer era ir a una prisión. La opción entonces era prestar servicio militar obligatorio.
Oscar says he saw his friends die in Vietnam.
Cuando dieron el reporte, le habían metido 35 balas a ese compañero, porque él cayó de rodillas. Ya ahí automáticamente es cuando uno comienza a tener una apreciación de lo que está pasando y hace que uno piense en las vidas que se pierden. En otras palabras, somos dispensables, somos seres que, no contamos para nada.
He came back from war as a hero, and he received the Bronze Star for his service. But years later, he would be labeled a terrorist. Oscar joined a group that also believed in taking up arms to fight for Puerto Rico's independence. U.S. prosecutors accused this group of carrying out more than 100 bomb attacks, including one in New York City that killed 4 people. But Oscar says he never killed anyone.
Si hay un pequeñito, un pelo que haya de que yo participé de esa actividad, entonces tú me puedes declarar terrorista. Tú me puedes declarar terrorista, pero si no me puedes declarar terrorista porque yo no cometí ese crimen.
Prosecutors couldn't link him to any deaths, but they did charge him with plotting to overthrow the U.S. government after they arrested him during a traffic stop.
Agarra ahí un bolso a la parte de atrás del carro, un backpack, y lo abre y ahí hay una pistola. Entonces él grita al otro policía, el otro policía viene y ahí es que nos arrestan.
He spent more than 35 years in prison, including 12 in solitary confinement. But he did not change his mind about Puerto Rico.
Yo creo que Puerto Rico tiene el potencial para ser una nación libre y soberana. Yo no tengo la menor duda de eso.
¿Cuáles son los pros de independencia para Puerto Rico?
Primero, la posibilidad de mandar nosotras en nuestra propia casa.
María Lourdes Santiago is one of the leaders of the Puerto Rican Independence Party. The party has been around since the 40s, and in the 50s, it got as much as 20% of the vote, making it the second largest party in Puerto Rico. But that number has been shrinking ever since, hitting 2% in 2016. And when asked the question of Puerto Rico's status, no more than 6% of Puerto Ricans choose independence. Senator Santiago blames the government's persecution of independence supporters.
Durante décadas, la policía de Puerto Rico, en contubernio con el gobierno federal, mantuvo expedientes criminales. Había un piso completo del cuartel general dedicado a documentar las actividades de los independentistas, como si era una reunión del Partido Independentista o de cualquier otra agrupación. fuera algo que ameritara un castigo.
She's talking about the carpetas. For decades, the FBI kept secret files on people who did as much as go to a meeting about independence. These secret files were called carpetas, and the people who had them were often denied jobs and blacklisted.
Para mi papá fue un choque tan duro que mi hermana y yo resultáramos ser independentistas porque eso anticipaba una vida más difícil.
But with a new generation, that stigma attached to the Independence Party might be dissolving. In 2020, Senator Santiago was the candidate who got the most votes to be elected to the Puerto Rico Senate. But some would argue that voting for a candidate from the Independence Party is not the same as voting for independence for Puerto Rico. And it gets even more confusing if you mix in US politics. Some Republicans don't want Puerto Rico to be a state because it has billions of dollars in debt and because Puerto Ricans speak Spanish. And some Democrats do want Puerto Rico to be a state because they believe that Congress members from here would be Democrats, therefore giving them more power. But they also say that would finally give Puerto Rico voting representation in Congress. Senator Santiago says, no, thank you.
Asumir que lo mejor que le puede pasar a un pueblo es asimilarse a otro, es en el fondo, aunque haya en la superficie buenas intenciones, en el fondo es una visión profundamente racista que desprecia la capacidad de un pueblo y de su identidad nacional de echar para adelante en igual condiciones con las otras naciones del mundo.
But then the question is, what about federal funding? Because Puerto Rico gets billions of dollars from the US every year.
Es bien importante recordar que el sistema de beneficencia estadounidense, sobre todo cuando opera en el contexto colonial, está diseñado para perpetuar la pobreza. Por eso no nos puede extrañar que hay dinero para no incentivar a la gente a trabajar. Sin embargo, no aparecen recursos para desarrollo económico de Puerto Rico.
One thing that has made it very clear to some that Puerto Rico is still a colony of the US is the board that was imposed by the US on Puerto Rico to manage its finances. That's a group of members who were not elected by the Puerto Rican people, but who have recently demonstrated that they have the power to override the local elected government. They're in charge of getting Puerto Rico out of bankruptcy, but they're also responsible for cuts to things like education and pensions.
La realidad de la Junta de Control Fiscal está ayudando a que el país enfrente lo que significa vivir bajo la bota del gobierno estadounidense, sobre todo una juventud que ha crecido en la precariedad, sienten que el sistema les empuja hacia el exilio económico.
Definitivamente de aquí a un tiempo a que me gradúe no me veo lamentablemente dentro de mi isla, aunque quisiera. Es doloroso siquiera pensarlo, tener que irme.
Robin Lee wants independence for Puerto Rico.
Why would you want to be a state under an empire that has literally corrupted everything we have today? They have tried to erase our culture. They literally persecuted us when they got here. We did not receive them or invited them here to have some coffee or some galletitas. Like they literally arrived and they started bombing us.
I met her at Casa Canales in Jayuya. That town was at the center of the uprising in the 50s and where nationalists tried to declare Puerto Rico a free republic.
Creo que es un lugar bastante sentimental, como Pipiola.
Robin believes any other status for Puerto Rico would be risking her identity as a Puerto Rican.
Yo nací en Puerto Rico, soy puertorriqueña, y ellos quieren borrar lo que queda de nuestra puertorriqueñidad para poder incluirnos a la suya, para poder hacernos igual que ellos. Si no somos igual que ellos, no nos van a incluir. Espero que de viejita pueda tal vez decir que puedo regresar a mi isla o quedarme en mi isla y porque sea independiente.
Puerto Ricans want some kind of a relationship with the United States, either statehood or Commonwealth, or a form of Commonwealth, which they call free association.
Despite the fact that you, as an individual, would prefer independence for Puerto Rico, you're clear that the majority of Puerto Ricans don't want independence.
Absolutely. And that is a fact that I don't like, but I have to come to terms with it.
Emilio Pantojas Garcia is a historian who has both studied the persecution of pro-independence Puerto Ricans and lived it.
I have a file, an illegal file that was created on me because I was for independence. And the FBI,
you have a carpeta.
a carpeta. I do have a carpeta.
But even putting all of that aside, he's aware that most Puerto Ricans are not willing to risk federal funding or the U.S. passports for future generations.
The colony has certain advantages. The world is contradictory. And so the colony, being the most important colony of the most powerful country in the world, has its advantages, but it also has great disadvantages. And you will see, if you interview other people, the self-hate, the self-derision, because it doesn't come bluntly. I hate myself. It means, oh, I want to be an American. I want to be part of the United States. We want to be part of this. We want to be part of that. The federal funds. And so that's self-hate. That is not trusting yourself. That is colonialism in the worst expression, which is the colonialism in the soul and the mind of the people.
So, could Puerto Rico make it on its own? Independence supporters say, of course. In fact, they believe that being free from the United States means opening up to a world of possibilities.
Puerto Rico is an economically viable country. If it were to be part of a community of the Caribbean, there are sovereign countries that are small and progress. So we're not going to starve. We will need to work more, for sure, of course.
But if the majority of Puerto Ricans don't want independence, what other options are there? Well, there's something in the middle that ranges from a version of what we have today all the way to an option that would give Puerto Rico more sovereignty. And of course, there's statehood. I'm going to be exploring those options in the next 2 videos, so stay tuned for the next couple of weeks when I'm going to be posting that.
Wow. Okay. I think we're muted up, guys. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, that was very good.
Yes, that's amazing.
So informative, right?
So
that was crazy.
Now, as far as the independence, as far as that video right there, for one, it is, to me, it's crazy. It was touching how they still talked about the racism, the impact, how, the obligation to go to war,
right,
during Vietnam, and being given that, and we've heard stories of this even in the States as well, having that ultimatum: you're either gonna go or you're gonna go to prison. And even to experience that, I think that was that really hit home, because a lot of those guys before the war didn't experience that. You might experience it here and there on the island within the own people, but not to that extent of, being of color, but in a different setting at war, experiencing that with, oh man, that really, that really hit. Right.
And me being a service member as well, that was heartfelt, because you're obligated, but you don't have all the perks as someone who is on this soil. Right. So it's like being forced against your own will. And once you get back, you're back to your own playing field, because you're not one of us.
Yeah. Ain't that something?
It's super whack.
And I see the passion. I see the passion behind the fight for independence. Me personally, as far as, I'm not going to say, I know we're going to dive into the other political parties, the 3 main political parties, because I know there's more. There are more. And I'm not going to necessarily say that I'm with or against any of these parties. I don't want to give that opinion.
You're not here to pick a side. You're not
right.
Here to
don't want to pick a side, right? But as far as Puerto Rico successfully becoming, let's say Puerto Rico wanted to successfully become independent, right? I think you would have to develop, it would redevelop in a mindset, with as far as, a collective confidence and a different identity, a national identity, right? A long-term vision, patience, unity over the division, because even in Puerto Rico, there's division. right? And you see it right here with the parties. Also having a different type of spirit, an entrepreneurial, innovative spirit, rather than what I see, reliant attitude, right? And more engagement and responsibility. We got to take responsibility. We got to take accountability, and a better global orientation as well. By that, that's changing different relationships with different countries, right? And it's definitely an interesting topic. I think I can go on and on. It got me going. It got me going for real, for real.
I agree with you. I think for us to even have a conversation about independence, we have to start reclaiming the reins of our own mind. Reclaiming autonomy of thought and mobilizing toward true independence, both political and psychological, that requires a comprehensive shift in consciousness, okay? Strategy and social infrastructure.
Yeah, infrastructure.
The Puerto Rican Independence Party and other pro-independence movements, this process involves unlearning colonial mindsets, reviving historical identity, and mobilizing collective action, like you said, with new clarity. So the first thing that I feel, and I believe he said, he said something about, I wrote it down, colonialism in the mind and the soul. So so we have to decolonize the mind, the consciousness first. We have to re-educate the public. We got to promote Puerto Rican culture, language, and narrative. We got to combat the psychological normalization of dependency.
Yeah.
Through media, schools, and anything that celebrates autonomy and self-determination. All right. Because we have been dependent for so long that we need to rewire our state of mind.
Go back to a self-sufficiency, and reinvest in yourself. Right. Self-sufficiency. I agree.
I think there's so much to be said about that. I mean, it sounds like a great idea. It sounds beautiful, but are we really? I mean, people that are not even Boricuas are still depending on the United States government. We're using a phone dictating to us how we even act because we're living in a different time of technology.
Right.
Have you ever seen that? They even telling you when to breathe. The phones.
Oh man. Oh, ain't that something? You've been up too long. Go to sleep. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Johnny,
so could you imagine?
With that right there, like it was that like, that's to me, and I know y'all agree, like that's like just new information, a different perspective.
Yeah.
These are things that I believe are not being spoken about often, especially on stateside.
Yeah.
They ain't gonna show this too much.
No.
Right?
No, not at all. And what's crazy is I was just on the island a few months ago, and I felt like going back, because I haven't been back since I was a child, was like a new breath of fresh air. Like I was able to soak in the culture and see the people, and definitely their struggle, but there's a lot of happiness as well.
Yeah.
I was walking around, got to see some establishments, but I saw a lot of concern. There was a lot of concern, people want to be able to move on their own, but they can't. It's kind of like a puppet.
Yeah.
You're on strings, and like if my middle finger goes up, you have to go up. It's kind of like that. And it was heartfelt because I'm like, man, I wish I was here to be able to assist. But then there's there's the blockage. I'm in the States, you're out here. And then there was also something I learned that, since I was born, in the States.
That's a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in the States.
Do you have a say?
And everything, stay here.
Yeah.
Right. Because ideally, I've saved enough funds because I'm gonna bust it out. When I was there, ideally, I wanted to open up my own restaurant. While I was there for that week, I was like, I can and start incorporating the locals and also incorporating the friends and family I have in the United States to come here to actually make that place a place of comfort, we're gonna have the good food. That's automatic. Puerto Rican food. I'm not biased, but it's the
most delicious.
Yeah, hands down.
Right.
And
It's the most favorable. Yeah.
Now, you know, as far as you know, you speaking on, you saying, you know, you want to do more, you want to help. So I'm gonna touch on that. Now, you see that people want change, you know, but also there's a pushback. There's people that want change, and then there's longevity. There's that indoctrination as well, from what I see, of being comfortable, being reliant on, you know, that assistance, right? So there's a pushback. So this is where it's, yes, you see different perspectives, right? But how do you change or influence the mindset? Go back to what Dr. Poetry was saying. It's about restructuring the mindset, right? I think you pointed out something, Dr. Poetry. It was on the mindset, right? Like, I know you quoted something, and it was more along
decolonizing the mind. We got to decolonize the mind consciousness first. Absolutely. We have to re-educate the public. We have to promote Puerto Rican culture. We have to combat the psychological normalization of dependency. But this is generational. This has been instilled since when were we ever free? One day? The last time we were free, I think we were Taínos. We were Arawaks. Okay? So we've been dependent, and that was something that was given to us, because as we get into the second option, the second status option, you're going to see what really went on there. Now, I'm not trying to gear anyone towards a political party, but you got to open your eyes and open your mind, right? Sometimes we have tunnel vision, but we have to pay attention to what is really out there. Why are we in the Commonwealth, quote unquote? Why we're looking for free association. We're looking for Commonwealth to stay here. How did we get here?
Right.
And that's why it's so important to revisit the structure of these political parties, right? The roots of it and what was behind it, you know. So yeah.
So that party is the Puerto Rico Independence Party, PIP, Partido Independente. Hold on one second.
Partido Independentista.
Puertorriqueño, mala mía, my bad, yo.
Partido Independentista Puertorriqueño. Sí, yes, it's okay. Listen, we gotta have a show on the New Yorican and New Jersey Rican and all those things that they call us, because
I'll just say PIP.
Yeah, PIP. El PIP. Hip, hip, hip. Yeah. No, it's all right. It's all right. Hey, this is what happens. But you know, before we go to the next video, guys, I really want to take a quick commercial break. And I want us to shout out DJ Chili Chill. And the DJ Chili Chill show airs on Tuesdays.
Yes.
He just aired his first season and first episode. Beautiful. I love it. Shout out to the DJ Chili Chill show, y'all.
Tune in, powered by DJ Chip and the Birdhouse DJs. Featuring Birdhouse artists such as Candyman Raw, Boriken Worldwide, and Silhouettes. Follow the Birdhouse on Clubhouse and online. Or y'all follow at the Birdhouse website.
Chili chill on the grill, come do what you do. We wildin' in the Birdhouse, who's next in the queue? We wildin' in the Birdhouse, yo, we always wildin'. We wildin' in the Birdhouse, yo, we always wildin'. Chili chill on the grill, come do what you do. We wildin' in the Birdhouse, who's next in the queue? We wildin' in the Birdhouse, yo, we always wildin'. We wildin' in the Birdhouse, yo, we always wildin'. It's your boy Bo, chillin' with the Bird Gang, and your boy Chili Chill do the damn thing. You can rap, make beats, you can even sing, you can do it all right here on your way to fame. Don't let nobody tell you different. Never give up on your dreams, know that you're gifted. You are what the game's missing. Big everybody, vibes only, so chill with the sneak dissing. If you independent, throw it up. Chilly chill, keep it real, that's what's up. Northwest, east to south, we all doing big in the birdhouse. Chilly chill on the grill, come do what you do. We wildin' in the birdhouse, who's next in the queue? We wildin' in the birdhouse, yo, we always wildin'. We wildin' in the birdhouse, yo, we always wildin'. Chilly chill on the grill, come do what you do. We wildin' in the birdhouse, who's next in the queue? We wildin' in the birdhouse, yo, we always wildin'. We wildin' in the birdhouse, yo, we always wildin'.
What a bird game! You know we always keeping you lit in the birdhouse.
Taína, africana, española, somos moras, forevermore. ¿Qué será de mi Boriken? On Fifth Avenue, in New York City, 12 noon in the month of June. On the streets of New York, it transforms into Boriken. Everyone's Boricua, and we all proudly parade. Taína, Africana, Española, Mora, Boricua. Our heritage is displayed, dancing and singing with our ancestors. Grace, elegance. I'm craving more congas and bongos. I want to shake. The Atlantic Ocean where the sand and the skies blend. The food is so delicious. The flavorful aromas. Boricuas are brave souls on the island of Boriken. And it runs deep. These roots run deep. We are Moors. Have you ever had some arroz moro? Have you ever walked through the morro? Amor, hay que vivir con alegría. Y la moraleja detrás de la bandera borinqueña. Típico como el coqui, como la yuca, la caña y el maíz. You see, the blood is mixed, whatever that means. But we know that there's beauty in this beautiful, beautiful mixture. It's what makes us great. It's the real reason why we wave our flags and pride. You know, we were denied the ability to wave that flag. It was illegal at one point. So we wave it every time we want to. So we're celebrating this bouquet of hues. This beautiful bouquet of hues. We're urban country islands. Que viva Vieques, que viva Culebra. Las playas, pero que linda, 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 que bella. 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 Típico como el coqui, como la yuca, la caña y el maví. Típico como el coqui, como la yuca, la caña y el maví. You know, we summon our ancestors every other day, probably. ¿Y tu abuela dónde está? But this is what makes a flavorful crowd. Where's your grandmother at? And I just remember listening to the whispers of my ancestors. Escucho una voz que me dice, somos tus ancestros, bisabuelas de las bisabuelas, pues yo soy taína, yo soy africana, yo soy española, soy una mora, boricua, pero qué bonita, bonita bandera, de mi isla bonita, pero qué linda, la estrella del Caribe, pero qué linda, 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 qué bella. Pero qué linda, 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 qué bella. The white sandy beaches of flamenco. De ahí vengo yo, de ahí vengo yo. Pero qué linda, 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 qué bella.
¿Qué será de mi borinquen?
Típico como el coqui, como la yuca, la caña y el mavi.
¿Qué
Típico como el
será de mi
coqui,
borinquen?
como la yuca, la caña y el mavi.
¿Qué será de mi borinquen?
Somos boricuas, para que tú lo sepas. And I'm Dr. Poetry.
Será de mi
¿Qué será
borinquen.
de mi borinquen? Como la yuca.
Somos boricuas.
I've been there so many times.
Epa. I love
What
that.
in the borinquen is going on here, Johnny?
Fifth Avenue, that was my spot.
Right?
Every year.
Coming soon, you know we're going to be live with the whole Puerto Rican Day Parade. That is the anthem for the Puerto Rican Day Parade. I created that. I created the beat. And I love this mix that DJ Chili Chill has out as well that he's scratching on. I'm going to ask him if he could prepare something because I love what he did with it. And I get excited every time I hear the boop, doop, boop, boop.
Yep.
You know, you hear the Taino, you hear the African, you hear the Spanish, you hear everything. And I love that. So shout out to that piece.
Matter of fact,
Yeah.
DJ Chili Chill did mix that up last show. So if y'all missed it, make sure y'all go check that out.
He did it.
That
Check
makes
out the
fire.
Birdhouse.
Yep.
Yes. The Birdhouse does this thing, and DJ Chili Chill was on fire with that. I was in the back like, ¿Qué será de mi borinquen? I was like, get it together. Dr. Poetry, relax. I'm Dr. Poetry. Get it together. All right, let's get back to this. So we got this video, and we're gonna go into the Commonwealth, right? Quote unquote, because that even in itself has a lot to be said there. You know what I mean? There's a lot. I want to make sure that we understand everything. All right, y'all. So here we go.
As far as the Commonwealth, that's the Popular Democratic Party, right? That's the Partido Popular.
Partido Popular Democrático.
Democrático, right? Okay.
Right. But you know what?
And that supports Puerto Rico's current status as a U.S.
That's correct.
Right? Okay.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm gonna bring this up right now, y'all, so we can play this video. I love the way she explains things. I really like what she does here. So here we go, y'all.
So what is Puerto Rico? Because it's not its own country, but it's not a state either. So it's in this kind of limbo where it belongs to, but it's not a part of the United States. Officially, it's a commonwealth. But more and more Puerto Ricans are agreeing that's just a fancy way of saying colony.
I think that Puerto Rico at this point is a colony. America has a colonist problem.
But how is that possible? Because in the 50s, the US announced to the world that Puerto Rico had been decolonized.
It was a monumental hoax.
And that Puerto Ricans would now rule themselves.
Creo que nos engañaron al pueblo puertorriqueño.
There are some who believe it was all a lie. Others defend the Commonwealth status.
You can't just say that didn't happen, it was a fallacy.
But if there's agreement on anything, is that what's happening right now is not benefiting Puerto Ricans.
This is the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Today, Puerto Rico has come into its own, a real democracy.
If you watched the previous video, you know that in this series, we're talking about the status options for Puerto Rico. We already covered independence. In this video, we're talking about the middle option. But the middle option is really a range of options. Let's talk about what we have today. That's the Commonwealth. In Spanish, the official name is Estado Libre Asociado. We call it ELA for short. And we can't talk about the ELA without talking about Luis Muñoz Marín. Muñoz Marín was born the same year the U.S. invaded Puerto Rico, 1898. He was the son of a famous politician, and he went into politics too. He became a senator in the 30s. What's interesting is that at this time, Muñoz Marín supported independence for Puerto Rico. But this was also the time of the Great Depression, and Puerto Ricans were suffering extreme poverty. At the same time, that militant group I told you about in the video about independence, the Nationalists, they were clashing with the U.S. government in Puerto Rico. There were a series of killings that prompted a U.S. senator to say, if they want independence, let's give them independence. And he proposed a bill, but some Puerto Ricans believed that bill was too harsh. One of the things it proposed was a full U.S. tariff from Puerto Rico shortly after it became independent. And the island was already struggling economically, so that would have been a huge hit. And this is where you see Muñoz Marín take a different path from his party, because his party still supported the bill. They believed their freedom from the U.S. was worth it. And the saying became, independence even if we starve. But Muñoz took a much more practical approach. He supported independence, but not if it meant falling deeper into poverty. So instead, he used his connections with the US government, at the time the FDR administration, to bring New Deal money to Puerto Rico. But that didn't come without strings attached. Now it was the 40s and World War II was in full swing. The US wanted to use Puerto Rico to set military bases. It was during this time that the Navy took over the island of Vieques. Years later, when the JFK administration was considering forcibly removing the entire population of Vieques, Muñoz Marín strongly advised them against it. But he also said if there was a referendum for the Navy to take over the island, he would do everything in his power to get a yes vote. So that gives you an idea of the kind of relationship he had with the US government and why some Puerto Ricans thought he was a traitor. But to suffering Puerto Ricans who heard his promise to address poverty and improve their quality of life, he represented hope. And in 1948, he became Puerto Rico's first elected governor.
Under Marín, the Puerto Ricans now have as much political freedom as any state in the Union.
He was also responsible for industrializing Puerto Rico.
The miracle of modern progress.
He supported policies that invited U.S. corporations to take advantage of tax cuts and cheap labor. And in return, Puerto Ricans would get jobs.
It's meant new jobs and new wealth for Puerto Rico.
It also meant huge profits for U.S. corporations and problems for Puerto Ricans down the line.
Industrialization brought the collapse of the island's agriculture as Puerto Rico went from self-sufficiency in food production to almost total dependency on the U.S. to feed itself.
During that period of time between the New Deal programs in the 70s, there was an obvious improvement in the quality of life of everyday Puerto Ricans. There was better education, better health care. The life expectancy of Puerto Ricans went up from 46 years old to 72. But these programs also increased dependence on the U.S. So it was easier to make the case that separating from the United States was not in Puerto Rico's best interest. However, it was the 50s and it was no longer cool to own colonies. So the U.S. was starting to feel the international pressure regarding Puerto Rico. So along with Muñoz Marín, they came up with a solution where they wouldn't have to give up Puerto Rico, but also didn't have to make it a state.
Today, the flag of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico waves proudly beside Old Glory.
And this was how the Estado Libre Asociado, or the ELA, was born. Puerto Rico would remain a territory, but also have its own constitution and gain significant autonomy. This is the part where some people believe the U.S. only pretended to give up power.
Representations were made even before the United Nations that somehow Puerto Rico was now fully self-governing. But fundamentally, the relationship of colonial subordination remained intact because Congress kept full sovereignty over Puerto Rico. In other words, Congress delegated authority. That didn't mean that Congress couldn't take back that authority it had delegated, which it actually did.
Congress took it back in 2016 under President Barack Obama.
People of Puerto Rico need to know that they're not forgotten.
You've heard me talk about this before. This is the moment the Oversight Board was created. Puerto Rico was in massive debt it couldn't pay back. And the U.S. took away its power to make its own financial decisions. Now a group of people appointed by the U.S. would make those decisions for Puerto Rico. So the argument is, if Congress could so easily say, you no longer manage your money, we're going to pick a group of people to do it for you, then Puerto Rico has always been a colony, and the Commonwealth was a fallacy.
Tiene consecuencias políticas aquí también.
But Armando Valdez disagrees.
The fact that we are facing very serious challenges, both economically and politically at this point, doesn't mean that when it worked, it didn't work. It worked. The Commonwealth status worked for decades. We went from being literally the poorhouse of the Caribbean to being the largest economy in all of Latin America at some point.
But now, 5 years after the border was created, hundreds of schools have shut down. Puerto Ricans pay more for basic, unreliable services like water and electricity. And the population is in decline as tens of thousands leave every year in search of jobs. And Puerto Rican politicians might disagree on many things, but when it comes to the board, across parties, most agree it's colonial. So how do they plan to get out of it? That's where it gets tricky, because even within this middle option, there are different options. Let's talk about two. Some want to rescue the Commonwealth, so to speak. They believe the ELA was wonderful at some point, and that through negotiating with the US, it can benefit Puerto Rico again. Others say, forget it. It was never great. We need to throw it out and start over. But now from a position of power. They believe Puerto Rico needs to negotiate with the US on equal footing and enter into an agreement of free association. Now, the main difference between these two options is whether Puerto Rico continues to be a part of the US or becomes its own country. The way I see it is the difference between being someone's child or someone's spouse. As someone's child, you are entitled to certain things from your parents, like their last name. In this case, we'll say that's American citizenship. You're also entitled to child support, which in this case, we'll say it's federal funding. But in a parent-child relationship, it is the parents who hold the power. They have the last say. That would be Commonwealth. As someone's spouse, you can negotiate and agree to share certain things like a last name, money, resources. But when you're on equal footing with someone else, you can decide to walk away if it no longer works for you. In that case, Puerto Rico would have the freedom it doesn't have now, but it wouldn't necessarily be entitled to some of the benefits. That would be free association. Can you briefly tell me why that's not something you support?
It implies being an independent country. The United States could back away from the pact. The United States could decide to lower the levels of funding for Puerto Rico. There are any number of issues that would be up for negotiation that are not up for negotiation right now, and that I think are very important for the people of Puerto Rico.
Now, I'm going to make a quick parenthesis to say two things. Number one, that there's consensus that Puerto Ricans who are American citizens today would not lose their citizenship even if Puerto Rico were to separate from the US. It's more a question of what would happen with future generations of Puerto Ricans. And number two, that some believe the US has a responsibility to pay back after all the ways it has profited from having Puerto Rico as a colony. But that's a conversation for another video. What's really important for people who want free association is sovereignty.
So free association, in that sense, gives us the whole quantum of authority, of powers to actually make our own choices.
But sovereignty has become a dirty word in Puerto Rico. Politicians are scared to say they support sovereignty, and if they let it slip, it's used against them. This was the candidate for the Popular Democratic Party in the last election.
El ELA hay que desarrollarlo. La soberanía que tú quieres imponerme a mí como etiqueta, pues no me la puedes imponer, no me vas a marcar con eso.
La gráfica, no se la pongo yo, se la puso usted mismo.
And that's because the word sovereignty implies separating from the US, still maintaining a relationship. But again, the fear is the possibility of losing some of the benefits. But those who do support sovereignty say it's the only way to decolonize Puerto Rico. They believe that the Commonwealth status, the ELA, shouldn't even be on the ballot the next time that Puerto Ricans vote on this issue.
Realmente yo creo que eso es un disparate. Porque si vamos a descolonizar, pues no puedes tener en la papeleta la opción de la colonia.
But the leaders of the party that Luis Muñoz Marín founded still believe in the Commonwealth status.
¡Qué bueno es el Estado libre asociado! ¡Qué bueno es el ELA!
Do you truly believe that through negotiations with the US, that status can be improved to the point that Puerto Rico has true autonomy?
I think it can be, yes. Because if not, what's the option? I mean, are we going to become a state tomorrow? No. Are we going to become an independent country? I mean, I don't see much support for it here. Frankly, I don't see much support for it in the US either. So simply saying, well, you know, the Commonwealth supporters are happy colonials, or, you know, we just need to eliminate all other options, get them off the table. I don't see where that gets us.
There's also a generational divide. An older generation has stories of their parents or grandparents being lifted out of poverty during what they saw as the golden years of the ELA, while the youth today has grown up seeing budget cuts and unemployment. But that's not to say that there aren't youth that still support the party of Luis Muñoz Marín. Meet Swanee and Nate.
Tenemos que comprender que tiene sus ventajas estar aliados con los Estados Unidos.
Swanee works within the party and she sees the division over the status question. Personally, she thinks the status can wait.
Yo creo que debemos enfocarnos en desarrollar la economía del país para luego enfocarnos en temas de estatus. Mientras tanto, se sigue cayendo la economía y el país sigue sufriendo, luchando por un estatus político que al final del día no hay ambiente para eso.
In a way, what Swanee proposes is the way that Muñoz Marín managed to win elections in the 40s and 50s. His famous phrase was, el estatus no está en issue, or the status is not on the table.
En cuanto se declaró eso, empezó una era de progreso muy rápido en Puerto Rico. Antes había habido un estancamiento tremendo.
But today, some 70 years later, some Puerto Ricans feel stuck again, without full autonomy and without full rights within the US. And you'll see in the next video why some believe the status question can't wait any longer. We're going to be talking about statehood, the pros, the cons, and why after more than 100 years, it hasn't happened.
All right. We are muted up, guys. Let's unmute.
We are back.
We are
What
back.
do you think about that?
You know, honestly, from what I take from it, so that's the PPD. That's the PPD in short. That's the Democratic. Is that Democratic? Right. Okay. So, I mean, I got some pros. I can get some pros and some cons from what I get from that, right? And that's only from like my perspective, the people's perspective, because I do see where they're coming from. They're you know, and you hear a lot of the perspectives from leaders as well. Like, I'm looking at it more from the people. You know, the pros I do see, like, okay, for one, cultural identity. Their cultural identity, it feels protected in a sense. Like, I feel like Islanders value their distinct language, the customs, you know, and identity, and their stance, like that stance kind of reassures them that they won't be diluted under the U.S. statehood in that party, right? And I can see where the no federal income tax, I can see the pros in that. I can see the balance in the relationship between Puerto Rico and the U.S., right? And then also like the fear of losing autonomy. You know, it's a risk. Like, some see the statehood like as a risk, right? For Puerto Rico's control over internal affairs, education, language. And I feel like that PPD, that party, it keeps that autonomy, right? And it's familiarity, right? It's familiar. But also I see a lot of cons in that too, right? Look at the fact that they're still second-class citizens. The current status makes the U.S. citizens without full rights. No votes in presidential elections, and also limited congressional voice, right? And also economic stagnation is stagnant. The economy is stagnant. The youth is frustrated, right? They feel stuck in a system. Look at also, this is stuff from my experience too, disaster response, inequality, right? After Maria, there was slower federal aid, and the Commonwealth status gave Washington an excuse to deprioritize the island as well. So this is give and take, right? This status, to me, is status confusion. It's the best of both worlds model, right? And it can feel outdated and misleading at times. People often feel Puerto Rico is treated like a colony and not like a partner, right? So with that right there, it's tough. I can see where they're coming from, but I feel like you could argue, like, I feel like the status is kind of unclear and it leaves Puerto Rico in like a limbo, You know,
I have a couple of things that I want to say about that, because I can't help but to think it's what I immediately think, and I guess because of my law enforcement and my criminology background, I go straight to a place where not too many people are gonna want to listen, or they're not gonna like what I'm about to say. But the truth is this, y'all. I see it as Stockholm syndrome. It sounds like I'm making a critical statement right now about Puerto Rico's political and social relationship with the United States. But comparing Puerto Rico situation, Boriken, to Stockholm syndrome, yes, I'm suggesting that I'm pointing out to a dynamic where Puerto Rico may seem to defend or remain loyal to a power like the United States that exerts control over it, even if that control is seen by some as harmful or limiting, because this kind of analogy that I'm using is often used in this type of political discourse to highlight, you guys could see it, the perceived, like you said, imbalances, right, in colonial or post-colonial relationships, especially where in Boriken there's limited self-determination or autonomy, right? And a lot of people criticize the United States policy toward Puerto Ricans, toward Puerto Rico, but we have to point out to the island's lack of voting of voting representation, like you said, in Congress, and its status as an unincorporated territory. What are we talking about here?
Right.
The evidence of systemic inequality.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be other people that are going to argue for the benefits of continued association.
Right.
So one of the things is that, to me, that's the Stockholm thing. You know it's not good for you. You know you've been under the boot. We know we've been through all that, but yet we're depending on that very person that's abusing. And I'm gonna use another analogy. It's like that person, that uncle that paid your education but violated you.
Right. You know, that's a good point. I feel like they're more focused on preserving the status quo rather than pursuing more solutions to the crises like debt, migration.
No, I don't think it's the status quo. I think it's the money. I think that if you notice the interviews, everything had to do with funding.
Yep, funding.
Where's
the funding?
It's not even about dignity anymore. It's not about dignity. It's not about
money.
How you look, your view. It's about your money. Economic. It's not even social. I don't even think it's social anymore. It's about money, because if it was social, it was how we looked appearance-wise, then we would start trying to plant our own seeds and go in there and try to pick ourselves up from our own bootstraps and try to create this, but that's not what's happening. We're so used to being dependent. We're so used to it. It's like that wife that can't leave her husband because she doesn't know anything else except depend on her husband. She never took a trade. She never did anything, and if she did, she doesn't know what it's like to be self-sufficient.
Because that's that quote unquote traditional lifestyle where the man is out working and then you have the women in the kitchen or at home taking care of the home, and they don't pick up, like you said, a trade or have the opportunity to educate themselves so they can be of reinforcement.
And they did educate themselves. You know what's so funny? The young woman from the prior video, from the Independent Party video that Bianca was talking about, I think her name was Robin Lee. Remember Robin Lee, your young girl?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I heard her say that, I love that quote, I'm telling you, I love that she says, we didn't invite the USA for coffee and galletitas.
Correct.
Right? But then she says, when I finish school, I'm gonna she's gonna study outside. I hope to come back. So what you're saying is this is part of the problem. So why are you not here to try to make it change? You're gonna go outside as well. Now, no shade on Dr. Pedro Albizu Campos, because everybody knows I slept in my college dorm with a picture of him on my desk and the Puerto Rican flag above me. Yet we had all this situation going on. But where did he study? In Harvard University.
Right.
Where he served Puerto Rico. This is why he came back distraught. So I feel like at times we're talking out of both sides of the mouth. No offense, no shade to anyone. I love everybody's point in these videos, and I respect everyone who's actually having this conversation. But let's talk about it. A lot of folks in the University of Puerto Rico, we have a lot of protests and a lot of things, and I've been there because of my background. The funny thing is, okay, so we don't want statehood, we don't want this, but you're still using these federal grants to go to school. So what are we creating to replace the statehood and the Commonwealth as an independent party? That's my point. How are we going to do this? If you're in school, you're getting a Pell Grant. Don't give me this nonsense, because during the pandemic, a lot of people received a lot of checks.
Yeah.
So we have this money in our pockets, and then we leave Puerto Rico to have a better life where? Are we going to Spain? Are we really going to Colombia? Or are we going to the United States? So you don't want the United States here, but then you'll go to the United States to live. I don't understand all that stuff. This is why we're having this conversation, because this is why I'm like, what in the Boriken's going on? I'm just saying.
Well, I have a book when I was on the island that I picked up, and I started reading, and I like to show it to the masses.
That's it. That's Dennis, right? Nelson A. Dennis, yes. Nelson A. Dennis. That's
Boriken
it right
there. Puerto Ricans. And if you haven't read it, dive in. You'll learn the history, and it specifies the battles in the 50s.
Yeah.
And it'll bring some more insight, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So did you read about Dr.
Yes.
Cornelius? Yes, I have a whole piece on that one. Because when I read up on Dr. Cornelius, dusty Packard roads, I have out. Make sure everybody out there go into Apple and listen to that, because that opened my mind. I wrote a whole piece on that Dr. Cornelius Dusty Packard roads.
And to piggyback real quick, in Spanish Harlem, there's a huge mural on the east side of Luis Munoz Marin. And he definitely had a huge impact. But it's your perspective.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think they all have one thing in common. Everyone was desperate.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Remember, he was independent at heart, but he understood that we cannot be in poverty. I understood that. It's just that, and I always say this: some people, because I'm not here to overthrow the United States. I'm just here to say that there's certain ways of being. Have you ever seen somebody who creates a problem and then they'll give you the solution, and now they look like the hero?
Yes.
It's like creating a disease, having some mask.
And then you create the cure.
Right. You created the disease. No. And then you create these masks that are standing by. So when the disease is out, you're going to prevent, like you're going to help us. And then you're going to give us these wonderful shots. And then we're going to find out that we have some side effects. I'm just saying, I'm just giving you an example. And then all of a sudden, you're the hero. You helped us. Oh my God, you are like the Messiah. And it's almost like you create the problem and then say you have the solution. And in the long run, you're not actually being saved. You're actually being buried without no rosaries, without no funeral, not even a picture by. And it gets ugly. But I want to go back to some, we have another commercial break. Quick commercial break, y'all. We just gonna do a quick commercial break. Shout out to the Poetic Clinic.
When my mind gets weary and my eyes get teary, I open my heart and bare my soul. The poetry begins to unfold. As I write or as I type, I capture the rhythm of my life. Happy moments, but also pain and strife. Poetry is my water, it's my life. Healing to my soul through find a stream flowing through my hopes and dreams. The healing power takes control, bringing peace to my weary soul.
Between Jersey and Boriken, in the heart of Camden, the streets is always moving with a rhythm. You hear that? You hear that? Old brick walls echo tales, a city's pulse within them. Steel and stone, like my ancestors' bones, hold the weight of history, of struggles and unknowns. The Delaware River whispers its waters deep and cold, reflecting dreams both new and old, where families fight to rise above, yet the scent of hope is thick with love. From Broadway's lights to the pier's dark shades, the struggle of survival, every penny made brick by brick. We build, we fall, we rise. Through every broken window, we dream with our eyes. And in the air, there's an echo of a song. From the island of Boriken, where we belong, we carry the weight of both worlds. Fierce and strong from La Isla del Encanto, where our roots grow long. My culture's pride is deep like the Coquis call. We dance to the bomba, against the odds we stand tall. The flavors of adobo, sofrito hit in the pan, taste like freedom, taste like home. Out here the streets pulse with the heart of our kin, where Puerto Rican flags wave and the fight won't end. Like the sound of pleneros or the beat of the caja, our souls are a mixture of struggle and triumph. Here we speak Spanglish, and our voices are loud, a blend of two worlds. Still unified in the crowd, we know what it takes. It's survival and thriving with each step we make. But in these streets, where pain meets joy, we hold the legacy from girl to boy, the culture, the love, the pride that we bring is the fire that burns in the song we sing. This is Deaf Poetry.
I like when he goes.
Was that T-Pain the Cuatro?
Shout out to that, man. And hey, on those both beats, I love what you say there though. When you say each brick, I love it because it's so real, man. It's so South Camden and it's so Boricua. And come on, Johnny, when you see that food, don't you? I smell it. I'm like, it's Christmas. I'm on pateles.
Yeah.
It was dope. It was dope. All right, y'all. We have one more video. We have more. So we're not. What? Stay hood. Stay hood. Stay hood. Stay hood. I don't know. When I say stay hood, I want to say stay hood. Like
what is it?
You know what I mean? Because what in the Boriken, you know, that is the current administration. Stay hood. The current administration is statehood. However, the current status is Commonwealth.
I love the fact that we're all speaking up on this for one. And just to chime in, you know, like I love the fact that we're all able to speak up on this. I encourage the viewers, if you guys are watching, you know, if this is enlightening, you know, we're learning as we go too. So we don't carry all of the answers. We're just sharing information amongst each other to continue to grow and continue to learn and be more open-minded, right? And you know, we got to dig for that. You gotta be willing to speak up. A wise man in New York once said, "Fucking excuse me," right? and yeah, I'm telling you that right there. He was going somewhere. He was going somewhere. He was willing. He ain't. It was no refraining from getting to where he was getting. It's an inside joke, right? But it's so true, right?
We were in Times Square. Tell him what happened. We were in Times Square, and it was in the heart of the middle Times Square. You know where the stairs are at in Times Square, where everything is going on.
Yeah, definitely.
Everybody's doing
Not
these
too far from the
videos.
recruiting office. Yeah.
Right. So you imagine, and he's in a wheelchair, right? And you know he was Boricua because you just know he's Boricua. Like his accent, he was like, and I heard it from afar, right? Excuse me. And he's trying to get through the side. Excuse me. And all of a sudden, I heard the Boricua come out. Fucking excuse me. everybody turned around. I never heard a fucking excuse me like that. I don't even know what that sounds like. Like,
it opened up.
Excuse me. And it reminded me of Lolita Lebron, like basically going on there, oh, y'all don't want to help out, you're going to Congress, you know. Boom, I didn't come here to die. I didn't come here to kill. I came here to die for my country. You know what I mean? It just, it was kind of like, fucking excuse me. God damn it, I'm right here. And I don't like to talk like that, you know. I'm just saying. But that was something. So that's like every time we're getting somewhere deaf and I go, fucking excuse me. Shout out to that man that was on 40 something street. Oh my God.
For real.
Probably my uncle.
Absolutely, y'all. I'm gonna get ready to get into this, y'all. This is the last video of a set of 3. Again, this woman does a phenomenal job.
Yes.
Shout out to Miss Bianca, right? Bianca Gabrielle, something like that. I should know her name. I'm sorry about that, y'all. I like her a lot. I think she's very diligent. I'm not a journalist. I like to examine certain things, and she does her homework. So shout out to you. And I love that she is neutral about things. She if you see her ask these questions to these great she's really doing her job.
Yeah.
As a yeah. And I see the passion in her.
Delivers both in Spanish and English.
I love that. I salute you, Bianca.
So no excuses.
No excuses, and I'm for it, man. Let's go. Let's see. Why isn't Puerto Rico a state?
Why isn't Puerto Rico a state? There have been Puerto Ricans pushing for statehood since the U.S. invaded Puerto Rico at the end of the 1800s.
United States territory since 1898.
In fact, the man who's considered the father of the statehood movement died 100 years ago. So what has taken so long? Why didn't the U.S. make Puerto Rico a state back then when it fought a war and took it from Spain? In one word, racism. The U.S. Supreme Court essentially said they're not like us. They decided that Puerto Rico and other territories now belong to the U.S., but would not be treated like states because the people who lived there were, quote, alien races. So you might not be surprised when I tell you that was the same court that approved segregation in the United States. Because, again, racism. But that horrible ruling that discriminated against Black Americans was eventually overturned. But what came to be known as the insular cases are still good law in the US, and Puerto Rico and other territories are still possessions that are treated differently than states. So the Puerto Ricans who still want statehood say it's time to change that.
Puerto Rico is a colony and would cease to be that once it became a state.
They believe it is overdue.
120 years later, it's about time.
And they say statehood is about democracy and equality.
It is crazy that we are governed by laws that we are not able to decide.
After the U.S. came to Puerto Rico and claimed it as theirs, some Puerto Ricans thought this meant they were going to be part of the Union. But those hopes came crashing down when the U.S. put in place a colonial government. The U.S. allowed Puerto Rico to have one person represent them in Congress, but that person could not vote. And that's still the way it is today. But let me take you 50 years after the U.S. took possession of Puerto Rico. They were still not inclined to make Puerto Rico a state.
But at this stage, neither independence nor statehood will meet the realities of Puerto Rico's economic position.
So in the previous video, I talk about how along with the governor, they push for what we have today, what we call the Commonwealth. But more and more Puerto Ricans are agreeing that's just a fancy way of saying colony. But it's important to note that at the time, a majority of Puerto Ricans supported that Commonwealth status, and the party that represented that option held the governor's seat for a couple of decades. But during that time, the statehood party was right there waiting their turn. And in the late 60s, they won the governor's seat. What they didn't get was a yes vote on statehood. At the time, 60% of Puerto Ricans voted for the Commonwealth status. But once they were in power, the statehood party worked to change the conversation. And for that, we have to talk about Carlos Romero Barceló. Romero Barceló became governor in the 70s, and he was responsible for changing the conversation about statehood in 3 ways. First, he insisted statehood was about equality.
He learned a lot of important lessons throughout his lifetime. Some of them he passed on to me, and I tried to honor him in those lessons. But the most important one that I learned, it's not about being a number, a star in the flag, or a number in a list of states. It's about being equals. And as the Constitution, we are all created equal, and that's what we fight for.
The second one was more controversial because Romero Barceló said statehood is for the poor. He said Puerto Rico should aspire to statehood because it would get the same welfare benefits as the rest of the states. And the reason this was controversial is because Puerto Rico was already heavily dependent on the U.S. at the time.
Today, fully 2/3 of the Puerto Rican populace receive food stamps.
So to some, it sounded like moving in the wrong direction.
When we say that the statehood is for the poor in Puerto Rico, is because they're going to have better services. You have better health services, you have better social services, you have more access to all the benefits that involve being a United States citizen.
And lastly, Romero believed Puerto Ricans are entitled to statehood. Right.
Iremos al Congreso no a suplicar de rodillas, sino de pie a exigir lo que por derecho como ciudadanos americanos nos corresponde.
More than 40 years after that speech and up until the end of his life, Romero stood by that message.
Lo estamos pidiendo, lo vamos a exigir, y no lo pueden negar porque somos ciudadanos americanos.
So the question is, what has changed in those 40 years that Puerto Ricans can now demand statehood and get it?
For the first time in history, we had exactly the same vote as the 37 admitted states. Statehood, yes or no. And we got a majority of the vote.
Puerto Ricans have been asked the question of status 5 times before, with mixed results and a lot of controversy. Because usually the way it goes is that the party in power will call for a vote, but the opposing party will disagree with the way the question is being framed. So in 2012 and 2017, the statehood option won, but the opposing party had called for a boycott, so they said that doesn't count. The statehood party still went to Congress with the results and asked for statehood, but didn't succeed. So in 2020, they tried again, and they asked Puerto Ricans if they wanted statehood, and 52% said yes. But the controversy of previous votes was still there. The arguments against this one are that the majority was too slim for such a monumental decision, that the turnout was low compared to other elections, and that other options were not included.
Always notice that the people that nitpick are those that oppose statehood and that won't accept statehood under any circumstance. So they're not doing it because they want to be electoral Puritans. They're doing it because they're trying to find anything to grab onto to prevent Puerto Rico becoming a state.
And then there's Jose Bernardo Marquez. He's a Puerto Rican legislator who wants statehood for Puerto Rico, but he says all parties should be included in the process.
While we are going to the U.S. government divided, it's the perfect excuse to keep ignoring the issue or saying that it's on us, the inability to find a solution.
There are 2 bills in Congress right now to deal with Puerto Rico's status. One of them seeks to make Puerto Rico a state based on the results of the last election. The other one calls for a status convention, where delegates who are elected by Puerto Ricans come up with status options. The U.S. agrees to those options, and then Puerto Ricans vote on them.
When I say I favor a status convention, my support of statehood is questioned. What I'm saying is, well, I'm really looking for a statehood. I'm not looking for a statehood in a symbolic way in order to gain votes every 4 years.
That last thing he said is directed at the pro-statehood party, and it is a common criticism they face, that they use the issue of statehood to get Puerto Ricans to vote for them. And it is true that every 4 years, Puerto Ricans hear the promise of statehood, and that this is the term when it will finally happen. It has even become a joke among some Puerto Ricans.
Si nos ponemos unas metas que son inalcanzables, entramos fallidas del principio.
And to further complicate things, one of the people who got elected this year to advocate for statehood in Congress was Ricardo Rosselló. the governor that Puerto Ricans ousted after a summer of protests. He's one of 6 delegates trying to get support for the statehood bill.
La igualdad para todos los puertorriqueños.
Melinda Romero is another one of the delegates, and both their fathers, Rosellos and Romeros, also went to Congress to ask for statehood years ago.
Si no quieren darme la cita, pues los espero en el parque. Así que de alguna manera vamos a llegar a los representantes del Congreso.
So did Kenneth McClintock.
Yeah, it took New Mexico 65 years between their first request for statehood and actually being admitted. There was not political will for that, but you have to persevere.
In some ways, New Mexico was like Puerto Rico in that for a long time it was seen as foreign, with too many Spanish speakers to become a state. But some statehood supporters believe the racism and colonialism that has led to Puerto Rico being treated differently is on its way out.
I denounce and I criticize all of the aspects of that project, a political project that are unjust as colonialism is. I just think that the best way to fight that is participating.
And just like her father, Melinda believes the U.S. owes it to Puerto Ricans.
Our young men and women have spilled all their blood defending the democracy that exists in the United States, and we are a very pro-democratic region, and I think that is one of the most important things that we have. The day that the United States ceases to be a democratic nation and a free nation, well, then maybe you have more people decided to separate instead of get included. But all the territories were abused at one point or another, and that doesn't mean that the nation in itself it's a bad thing to do.
So will it finally happen this time? Melinda says yes.
First of all, I trust myself. I know what I want, and I usually get what I want. And this is definitely a major change where we are here. We have an elected delegation. The people of Puerto Rico have clearly stated this is what we want. And I feel very confident that we'll be able to pass 5022 and eventually become the 51st or the 52nd state of the union.
What do you think? Do you support statehood for Puerto Rico? And do you think it will happen before this term is over? If you want to learn more about the other options of independence, Commonwealth, and free association, check out my previous.
What in the Boriken is going on? Oh my goodness. You guys, if you guys are muted, go ahead and unmute real quick.
I am just like saying the same thing. What in the Boriken is going on here? That's pretty much where I'm at with it.
As far as statehood, right? Me personally, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. I really think, you kind of lose your identity.
Yeah.
I feel like first you have, I think that debate alone is just a distraction from other major issues on the island: corruption, the unemployment, debt, the infrastructure. I don't think that will solve everything. I don't think that'll solve everything. A lot of times you vote and nothing changes. And also, I think you lose control over the laws, the education system, the uniqueness, the cultural institutions, everything. And it makes my hair stand up just thinking about it. We've lost, I think as a people, we've lost so much already as far as history, culture. I think in the state side, you fight for that culture. So I'm speaking on it in a different perspective. We fighting for that. I see the loss of the culture here. Why would I? Yeah.
The roots that get washed. And for Puerto Rico to stay the way it is currently, becoming a state won't resolve anything. You want to keep the culture, the roots, what they stand for.
Necessarily, they want equal rights. Like what? Like I don't.
Right.
Like what? Like how is it? Oh, it'll help the economy. Like how? I don't see it. And I see the representatives. Like I'm not buying that. Me personally, you know, that's you're selling me GMO. You're selling me GMO veggies. I want something straight from the dirt, straight from the soil.
I know you want that, but like I said before, and like we say in our intro theme, you know, you're gonna hear me say it. How do you expect to be free if you don't want to plant any seeds? I know you want that, but we living in a world where we're dependent. We need to reclaim the reins of our own mind and reclaim that colonialism mindset so that we can start looking and examining and even exploring the possibility of being free. We're not going to be free with that mentality that we have to depend on the United States. All I hear is funding. All I hear is corporate. All I hear is, you know, we need these benefits.
Money.
Right. You know, I hear Wu-Tang, cash rules everything around me. I know that this is all what it is. I know what you're saying. I agree with you. But what do we do with a colony that's been colonized for so long that does not know how to function without being dependent? And that is a fact. But don't listen to me. You know who I want you to listen to? I want you to listen to something really quick. I want you to listen to somebody that I love very, very much. I am a fan. I don't care what anybody says, because I'm a woman of a certain age, but I love what he says. Welcome, Bad Bunny's Hawaii. Let's listen to what he's saying here. Think about what he's saying here, y'all. Y'all ready? Let's go. Let's see. Hold on. Let's see.
Esto fue un sueño que yo tuve. Ella se ve bonita, que a veces le vaya mal. En los ojos una sonrisa, aguantándose llorar. La espuma de sus orillas parecieran de champán. Son alcohol para las heridas, para la tristeza bailar. Son alcohol para las heridas, porque hay mucho que sanar.
¡Epa!
En el verde monte adentro no se puede respirar. Las nubes están más cerca, con Dios se puede hablar. Se oye el jíbaro llorando, otro más que se marchó. No quería irse por Lando, pero el corrupto lo echó. Y no se sabe hasta cuándo. Quieren quitarme el río y también la playa. Quieren el barrio mío y que abuelita se vaya. No, no suelten la bandera ni olviden la Lola. Que no quiero que hagan contigo lo que le pasó a Hawái. Cuidado, Luis. Cuidado.
Cuidado, Dad.
Aquí nadie quiso irse y quien se fue sueña con volver. Si algún día me tocara, que mucho me va a doler. Otra jíbara luchando, una que no se dejó, no quería irse tampoco y en la isla se quedó. Y no se sabe hasta cuándo. Quieren quitarme el río y también la playa. Quieren el barrio mío y que tus hijos se vayan. No, no suelten la bandera ni olviden la que no quiero que hagan contigo lo que le pasó a Hawái. No, no sueltes la bandera, ni olvides ya no quiero que hagan contigo.
Shout out to Bad Bunny. Wow.
Eso es para pelo.
Quieren quitarme la Lelo Light. Wow.
Eso nadie me lo quita. Eso está en la vena, el Lelo Light. Y hablando del Lelo Light, porque hay un Lelo Light por ahí que tenemos también. Hay un Lelo Light. Yo tuve una situación, now I'm talking Spanish, I'm in my body. You notice that? Ahí tengo un Lelo Light, pero nosotros tenemos un Lelo Light por ahí. We have a song that we created, Def and I, and it's called Enamoré, right? And it talks about love. And when I wrote this, it came out of my soul. When I say that, I was writing and I was like, I said Lelo Light in there, and I didn't even realize that was in my DNA. I mean that, y'all. I didn't plan it like, oh, I'm gonna put this thing Lelo Light here. No, it came out like that. I was freestyling, and you'll hear the Lelo Light come out of me in a minute. So, welcome. You guys can find this everywhere.
Yes.
On all streaming platforms: Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Deezer, YouTube, all those platforms that you want to hear music. It's on there. This is Dr. Poetry with Def Poetry. Enamoré.
Hay que respetar todas las decisiones. Vivir en paz. El que se queda, el que escoge otro camino, pues yo me enamoré. Me enamoré de tu cariño, tu dulzura y tu mente. Me enamoré de tu lelo, ay, me enamoré.
Truth is, when I fell in love, I fell hard, y sin pensarlo. I forgot to love myself first. Truth is, if you ask me to define love, I think I give every example of what love wasn't. You see, I learned to love growing up in life, but I learned to love improperly. Truth is, I was addicted to survival mode, fighting to survive these narratives that I created in my mind, telling myself to run when confronted with real love. Me enamoré with the idea of love. Wow, me enamoré that agape love was infinitely unreachable. Me enamoré at a time I was unteachable. Truth is, me enamoré with my past now come present. I have resurfaced with wisdom. You see, me enamoré with new clarity. I had to fail at love to build it back to its rarity. I let go of the idea that things could have ended differently. What I had was real and beautiful while it lasted. Then to learn that my harvest is the result of my seeds and how I plant them. Today I'm decisive. I'm taking initiative. I've built endurance. I've mastered bearing. I've better judgment with more knowledge and enthusiasm. And most importantly, integrity. Me enamoré.
Tú me decías que me amabas, me tenía en la mirada. Te pido bájame las armas, me enamoré. Tú sigues en mi alma, ahora vienes y te marchas. ¿Por qué? Porque me enamoré de tu cariño, tu dulzura y tu mente. Me enamoré de tu lelo, ay, me enamoré.
De tu lelo.
What do you think about that, Johnny?
I can't sing, so it's phenomenal.
Ni en la ducha.
En la lucha, en la ducha. Bendito. But you can recite. I like what you did the other day. That was awesome. Check out Floetic Justice, y'all. Don't forget, that was a great episode, and I love that. We appreciate your time with us as well.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, did we all learn a little something today? Because I know I did. I was pretty much learning a lot from all those things being said. Again, don't forget, y'all, Monday's Poetic Clinic, and Tuesdays we have the DJ Chili Chill Show. Wednesdays we have Floetic Echoes. Today is Thursday, so we have What in the Boriken's going on here. Friday we have Floetic Videos. Make sure you check out all those wonderful pieces and expressions. Poetic, Floetic. We get in it with the Floetic Echoes. And on Saturdays, of course, the big event, Hear Me Out Poetry, with myself, Dr. Poetry, Deaf Poetry, Granny Wowzers, and Miss Cheesecake. And we on Saturday. So we are busy, and we're still writing. If you would like to be a guest on the show, you can call us direct at 787-401-9665. And if you would like to check out some of the stuff that we got going on, just go on our website, www.hearmeoutpoetry.com. If you want to email, you have an idea, you want to come on the show, you want to talk, you want to show us your poetry, you have something about what in the Boriken is going on, or you have a Floetic Justice, you know what? Email us too at hearmeoutpoetry7@gmail.com. We're here. We're not going anywhere. And we appreciate all your support, all your love, your follows. We see y'all, and we haven't forgotten you. I just want to take a little brief. I just want to kind of wrap it up really quick with all this stuff, because it was a lot of information, y'all. You know that, right? We just know that we understand what's going on with Puerto Rico. And in a nutshell, Boriken, Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's status remains a deep debate. It's a deeply debated issue. We can't do anything about that. With these three primary options often discussed as statehood, independence, or maintaining its current territorial status. And each option carries significant political, economical, cultural implications. So statehood advocates and it argues for full integration into the United States with equal rights and federal benefits, while supporters of independence emphasize national identity and self-governance. So maintaining the current status offers familiarity, but it also limits, it's limited, right? And there's limitations in representation and sovereignty. So ultimately, the decision lies with you, Puerto Rico, with you, Boricua. It lies within the Puerto Rican people. Power is the people and the evolving political landscape. So just make sure y'all tune into next week into What in the Boriken's going on. I am Dr. Poetry with Deaf Poetry and Johnny as our guest. And I hope you had a wonderful, wonderful time. Shout out to all of you, and keep all that love that you got and all that poetry within, because we're not going anywhere. And in order for us to get it right, we have to talk about it. We have to have this dialogue. All right. So shout out to y'all, and I'll see y'all next week.
They want to be free. 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 Free. They say they want to be free, yet they're not willing to plant any seeds. So how do we expect to be free without being self-sufficiently, governmentless, living independently? They, who's they? They who want change yet still sell their dignity and freedom in exchange for business transactions and political man-made sanctions, preferring an economical, political, and judicial system, welcoming corporatocracy. They're willingly controlled by business corporations, corporate interests. Corporate interests. I call it hypocrisy. Elizabeth Warren once referenced Theodore Roosevelt warning regarding powerful corporate entities threatening the very foundations of democracy, explaining back bailouts excessively paying for CEOs, and the exploitations of national treasuries, people, and natural resources. Yes, I'm gonna be criticizing globalization, corporatocracy, and a perverted form of aristocracy called oligarchy. Capitalism, bankers controlling the flow of currency, the wave of alchemy, with just a few to rule and command those with nobility, fame, and wealth. Feudalism is capitalism controlled by corporatocracy, owned by the oligarchy, which are the black nobility. I'ma say it again. I'm criticizing globalization, corporatocracy, and a perverted form of aristocracy called oligarchy, capitalism, bankers controlling the flow of currency, the wave of alchemy, with just a few to rule and command those with nobility, fame, and wealth. Because feudalism is capitalism controlled by corporatocracy, owned by the oligarchy, which are the black nobility. So tell me, I want to know, how do we expect to be free if we're not willing to plant any seeds and live self-sufficiently, providing for our own needs, providing for our own needs,
Providing